I am the Ambassador of Ireland, Michael Gaffey, and I'm also one of the co-chairs, along with UNIDIR and the Philippines, of the International Gender Champions Disarmament Impact Group. And we've been working in recent years to increase awareness of the gender dimension of arms control and disarmament, and substantive issues, as well as the issue of representation. And in recent times, an increasing number of delegations have been reiterating the importance of gender equality and gender perspectives in the biological weapons regime. So this event is designed to provide a forum for discussion of these topics, raising awareness about the role that gender perspectives and analysis can play in strengthening the Biological Weapons Convention and its implementation, especially in view of the forthcoming 9th review conference. So the event also marks the launch of a new fact sheet by the Disarmament Impact Group on gender and biological weapons, which I have here, and which I hope that you will all read and benefit from. Okay, just to tell you what we're going to do over the next hour and a quarter, we will start with opening remarks from two very distinguished colleagues. First, Ambassador Dr. Cleopa Mailu, chairperson of the BWC Meeting of States Parties and permanent representative of Kenya. And we're very honored to have Ambassador Mailu with us today. Then we'll hear from Daniel Feeks, Chief of the Biological Weapons Convention Implementation Support Unit, which is a co-organizer of this event, together with the International Gender Champions Disarmament Impact Group. And then following their remarks, we will have a moderated discussion with experts and diplomats. We'll have Grisel Rodriguez, chairperson of the BWC Meeting of Experts on Institutional Strengthening of the Convention and counselor at the Permanent Mission of Panama to the UN here in Geneva. And then we'll have Ngok Fong van der Blai, Political Affairs Officer at the Implementation Support Unit, and Stephanie Norlock, Program Officer with the International Federation of Biosafety Associations. And after that, we will have time for some questions and answers. And I would encourage you to engage with our panel in the questions and answers. You can send your questions using the chat function, and you can do so at any point. Do so from now if you wish. And then I can call on you to take the floor and put your question or your comments to the panelists. So just finally, before we get going, I just have to remind you that this event is being recorded and will be made available online afterwards. So let's get going with the substance of our event, and I am very pleased to give the floor now to Ambassador Mailu for his opening comments. Ambassador, over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador Gavi. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As the chairperson of the Biological Weapons Convention Meeting of State Parties, I would like to express my gratitude to the International Gender Champions Disarmament Impact Group and to the BWC Implementation Support Unit for organizing this important interactive discussion on advancing gender perspectives in the Biological Weapons Convention, and for giving me the honor to make opening remarks. I also warmly welcome the launch of a new fact sheet by the Disarmament Impact Group on gender and biological weapons. Similar initiatives should be encouraged and explored. Furthermore, I would like to extend my compliments to the distinguished speakers for agreeing to contribute to our discussion today. Gender is an important topic that deserves further awareness raising and create actions within the BWC regime. While some progress has been made over recent years on many aspects, much more could be done, and I'm grateful that the Disarmament Impact Group and the ISU have initiated this discussion. I would like to mention two areas where I believe further progress could be made. First, gender equality in the biological weapons regime. When looking at gender balance and women's participations, we are all aware that women are underrepresented in official arms control and disarmament diplomacy fora in general. Sadly, the BWC is not an exception to this pattern. In official BWC meetings, women comprise on average only 1/3 of all participants. Several efforts have been instigated by the UN and the BWC-ISU to change this pattern, and some progress have been achieved. I understand we will hear more details on these efforts from ISU during the panel discussion. As chairperson of the meeting of state parties, I believe that achieving gender balance at BWC meetings is an important goal that all BWC office holders should be promoting. Quantitative representation is not enough, however. We need to encourage qualitative representation as well. We need to promote women's empowerment and leadership within the BWC. At the 2019 meeting of state parties, only 20% of delegations were led by women. Similarly, only 22% of the national statements were delivered by women. Furthermore, throughout the BWC's 46 years history, only the 2013 meeting of state parties were chaired by a woman, and in both 2018 and 2019, only one of the 5 meetings of experts was chaired by a woman. I'm pleased, therefore, that this year, 2 out of the 5 meetings of experts are chaired by women, one of whom joins us today, but there is still room for improvement. While we, BWC office holders and the BWC ISU, will do our best to encourage gender balance at every level, the final decision is in the hand of each state party and is often the result of more systemic issues, such as the low level of female representative within some specific national agencies. I believe further efforts and sensitization should be initiated to ensure women's equal and meaningful participation, not only in BWC meetings, but women should be further engaged in international and national initiatives, activities, and programs addressing biological threats. Moreover, regional and international cooperation among state parties to improve gender equality in representation and leadership positions could be another option for further action. The second area I would like to underline is the sex-specific and gendered impacts of biological weapons. I was happy to see that UNIDIR published a report dealing with this topic in 2019 entitled Missing Links: Understanding Sex and Gender-Related Impacts of Chemical and Biological Weapons. This is a good start, but further research in this area should be encouraged. Lessons should be learned from past cases such as Ebola outbreak in West Africa, as well as from the current COVID-19 crisis. The impacts of crises are rarely gender neutral, and the current public health crisis, for example, reviews how differently men and women are affected. It has been noticed that during the current COVID-19 pandemic, social gender roles have led to different levels of exposure between men and women. Beyond social consideration, research suggests that men's and women's levels of susceptibility to diseases could also vary. Based on these lessons from natural disease outbreaks, one could extrapolate that following a biological weapons incident, gender roles may shape distinct experiences of social and biological trauma. Distinguished guests, I hope that the ideas that will be presented today will serve as an important inspiration to advance discussions on gender perspectives in the Biological Weapons Convention. I hope that the state parties participating in today's discussion will build upon ideas and suggestions to be raised by our panelists and feed them into the forthcoming meetings of experts and the meeting of state parties. Furthermore, state parties should also keep in mind the proximity of the 9th Review Conference and explore ways to feature gender perspectives in any future BWC work program. For example, state parties could adopt gender items that include gender perspectives or integrate a gender component into relevant programs and activities. As we have seen, many of the informal MX webinars included and will include gender perspectives in their discussions. In conclusion, accomplishing diversity and taking a gender perspective into account are not simply political principles or guidance we should promote. I believe they have added value and offer the possibility to widen our horizons. Bringing in more voices has long been a motto of the BWC, and the gender inclusiveness is another way to open ourselves to different perspectives. I wish you all a fruitful discussion today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that really comprehensive introduction to our discussion and for highlighting the full range of issues we face in terms of representation, but also a gender perspective to our work, which is not undertaken simply for the sake of itself, but to actually improve and make more relevant our work. And thank you also for mentioning the UNIDIR paper, The Missing Link, because UNIDIR is also a co-chair of the Disarmament Impact Group and a really, really important, effective one. We couldn't do the work without them. So I'm going to turn now to our second speaker, who is known to you all, Daniel Feeks, Chief of the Implementation Support Unit. So Daniel, I'll give you the floor now. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ambassador, and welcome to everybody as well. So, dear Ambassador Gaffey, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, let me first express my great appreciation to the International Gender Champions Disarmament Impact Group for co-organizing this important event with our BWC Implementation Support Unit. Many thanks, Ambassador Gaffey, to you and the other members of the group. I would also like to congratulate the group on the launch of the new fact sheet on gender and biological weapons that you just referred to, Ambassador. I agree that such initiatives should certainly be further encouraged, and more information in this regard is certainly much appreciated. I would also like to express my warm welcome to the speakers who will participate in our interactive panel later on today as well. Ladies and gentlemen, gender is an important topic that is deservedly acquiring more visibility within the BWC regime. Today's event is also very timely. We're in the final year of the BWC Intersessional Programme, and we're also approaching the 9th review conference, as Ambassador Mailu just mentioned. I therefore hope the discussions today will contribute to raising further awareness on this topic and also to triggering concrete actions. Moreover, discussing gender and the BWC in the midst of a global pandemic could bring new perspectives to the topic. Women have been differently and heavily impacted during the pandemic and by the pandemic. Experience from previous public health crises like Ebola underlines the vital interface between health and security, and women are playing an increasing role in both the health and the security areas. Lessons will certainly be learned from the COVID-19 pandemic that will be applicable in the BWC regime. States parties should not neglect gender perspectives when drawing on their experience from the pandemic. Adding a gender lens to our analysis may bring new solutions and address the issues from new angles. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to underline the systemic factors of gender imbalance, looking beyond the physical participation in a particular BWC meeting room, or as we've become accustomed to lately, one particular online event. Gender imbalance in STEM subjects, that's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, is an issue that many have pointed out over the years, and addressing it today could feed into more equitable participation in the BWC in the future. When we look at senior positions across those 4 subjects, there's clear evidence that more needs to be done to support women to reach leadership positions in these subjects in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We also need to support the next generations, especially girls, to develop and maintain skills in these areas. According to recent studies, boys' and girls' attitudes towards STEM subjects do not differ in the primary school years, and girls actually often perform better than boys in STEM and also in ICT-related tasks. However, as they get older, girls fear that they will be less successful than boys in STEM-related careers. Women are also less likely than men to enter or remain in STEM occupations due to the prevailing stereotypes or a negative work environment. In the case of the BWC, to achieve gender balance and increase opportunities for women, this systemic imbalance should be addressed by promoting initiatives to develop young women's capacities and skills in both the security and life sciences areas. We will hear about some initiatives in this regard in the upcoming panel discussion. We have also seen in recent years that the value of empowering women and seeking women's contributions in finding alternative solutions is being increasingly recognized. Maximizing participation by women can bring different approaches. Consequently, empowering women in both politics and in life sciences needs to follow a holistic approach where men also need to get involved as well. While discussing the rapid advances of sciences and technologies and their potential risks in our modern societies, it is crucial to use all the skills and talents available to address these challenges. So further including women in our discussions would only benefit the BWC regime. I hope that some of these points will serve as a starting point for your discussions later on. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave soon for another event, but my colleague Fong will participate in the panel discussion and she'll describe some of the concrete activities that we in the Implementation Support Unit have been undertaking to promote a gender perspective within our work. I wish you all a fruitful and interactive discussion. Thank you for your attention, and the floor back to you, Ambassador Gaffey. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you very much, and thank you for highlighting the absolute need to include as many voices as possible. Why would it be different in the BWC to anywhere else? Why would it be different in disarmament and arms control than anywhere else? But the truth is that disarmament and arms control have been a little slower than other areas to tackle, recognize, and deal with the gender dimension and gender representation. So that's why this is such an important discussion. And thank you for that. And we look forward then to engaging with Fong in the discussion. Before the discussion, I'm going to go to our next speakers, and I'm going to start with Grisel Rodriguez. And I just want to, oh, she's there, excuse me, I see her on the screen in front of me. Welcome, Grisel. In your view, how can gender perspectives be sustainably included in the Biological Weapons Convention? Now, you're the chair of the Meeting of Experts on Institutional Strengthening. And, you know, in talking to us, perhaps you could help by giving us some examples about the relevance of gender perspectives to the topic of institutional strengthening of the convention. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Gaffey. Good afternoon, Excellencies and distinguished colleagues. First of all, I would like to thank the International Gender Champions Disarmament Impact Group and the BWC Implementation Support Unit for organizing this timely discussion and for giving me the honor and privilege to be part of this esteemed panel. In order to address these questions, it is important to reflect on the efforts that have been made to mainstream gender perspective in the work of the BWC. This convention is the first multilateral disarmament treaty banning an entire category of weapons of mass destruction and was adopted in early 1970s. So it should not surprise us that the text of the BWC does not have any gender-related provision. In fact, if we look carefully its preamble, we will notice that throughout its text, it refers to mankind instead of a more gender-neutral language such as humanity. Multilateral debates on biological weapons have not considered the relevance of gender dynamics in the implementation of the BWC until around 2019, when the international community started to show an increased interest on this issue, including through statements at the meeting of states parties, research on potential gendered impacts of these weapons, side events, and informal exchanges. For the first time, the two latest UNGA resolutions on BWC adopted in 2019 and 2020 have incorporated a preambular paragraph encouraging the equitable participation of women and men in the framework of the convention. However, both resolutions didn't acknowledge the differentiated effects of these weapons. So far, none of the outcome documents of the meeting of state parties or of the review conferences have referred to gender considerations. In terms of participation, and Ambassador Mailu has addressed very well this issue, there have been slight improvement in this review cycle. However, women continue to be underrepresented in this forum, particularly in leadership positions. Throughout these years, the majority of the office holders were men. Against this background, it is clear that in order to promote a real change, a sustained effort is required. In other words, we need to bring this topic formally into our meeting discussions in the BWC. Since the review conference constitutes the only authority to make substantive and procedural decisions, the upcoming review conference provides a great opportunity for states parties to make recommendations to integrate gender perspective within the convention machinery and processes in a sustainable manner. Gender perspectives have already informed multilateral disarmament fora such as the Anti-Personnel Man-Ban Convention, the Convention on Cluster Munitions, and the Arms Trade Treaty. These initiatives vary between the adoption of measures related to gender balance and disaggregated data, the provision of age and gender-sensitive victim assistance, the inclusion of action that requires to mainstream gender considerations in the respective convention architecture, the inclusion of indicators that allows monitoring the progress made in that regard, and the appointment of gender focal points. All of this provides good examples that could be taken into account in the specific context of the BWC. As a first step, states parties could recommend the review conference to mainstream a gender perspective in all BWC machinery, including the ISU, the intersectional program, the meeting of states parties, the review conferences, and in any subsidiary body that could be established in the future. The idea will be to ensure that the different needs and perspectives of men, women, boys, and girls are considered and inform all aspects of convention in order to deliver an inclusive approach and to strive to remove barriers to full, equal, and gender balanced participation in the field of science and technology and in convention meetings. Another recommendation could be the inclusion of an agenda item at the meeting of the states parties and the review conference in order to facilitate a more focused discussion of the current state of play of initiatives and measures implemented to achieve this goal. The appointment of gender focal points or coordinators has proved to be an innovative approach. It has to be seen whether in the framework of the BWC, it would be suitable to create a similar mechanism or to entrust this task to one of the existing office holders, for example, one of the vice chairs of the meeting of states parties. There are other practical ways to improve gender equality that do not require a decision by the review conference, such as the involvement of women as technical experts, advocacy for a gender balance bureau in the next review cycle, and the collaboration between states parties and civil society to create an informal gender working group or coalitions to advance gender perspective in the BWC. From the point of view of institutional strengthening of the convention, gender perspectives are relevant in two accounts. One, inclusiveness, and two, the capacity to adapt the BWC, institutionally speaking, to respond to the needs of the diverse groups. Women, as well as men, should be able to take part in decisions that affect their lives. It's not only about counting women, but to make women count. The equal, full, and meaningful participation and leadership of men and women in all decision-making processes will ensure that the BWC is an open and inclusive forum, and thus enhancing the effectiveness of its processes and outcomes that would certainly have a positive impact in its institutional strengthening. Also, understanding how gender norms shape societies can help uncover different patterns of exposure to biological agents. The BWC must ensure that these differentiated impacts are assessed and understood, and that the existing BWC structure can guarantee that our institutional strategy and response is better targeted and enabling us to deliver greater results. Thank you, Ambassador.
Apologies, it took me a minute to unmute myself. Thank you very much for that. And that's a very, very important statement that you make, that it's not only about counting women, but about making women count. That really encapsulates what all our work is about. Just a quick follow-up, because you gave us a good set of recommendations there, which we could follow. And I just wanted to pick up your first one. You talked about mainstreaming a gender perspective in all the BWC machinery. Can you just say a few words on what in practice that would mean?
Yes, thank you. It will mean that it will not focus only on the area of institutional strengthening. Right now, all the areas of the BWC could benefit in applying a gender analysis or gender lens, including, for example, the framework of international cooperation, science and technology, national implementation, and response and preparedness. For example, states parties could support capacity building programs to develop expertise among women, such as fellowships, offering sponsorship and traineeship for women diplomats and women in the field of science and technology participating in BWC-related activities and negotiations, including, of course, youth scientists, because we are trying also to promote the engagement of the future generations in our work. A gender criteria could be included in the sponsorship programs for delegations that attend the meetings of the BWC. Also, it would be important to promote and fund research on gender impact of biological weapons for the reasons I expressed earlier. Applying a gender lens in science and technology means, on the one side, to promote more participation of women working in this field, and on the other side, to monitor the advances in the field of science and technology in order to ensure that those advances do not perpetuate or amplify existing social biases, including gender biases. In terms of national implementation, it is important, and we have seen from the experience of the global pandemic, on the importance of mainstreaming a gender perspective in our public health systems, and to also ensure the collection of gender disaggregated data. We have seen from the experience that women are in the front line of the pandemic, but on the sideline of the relevant decision-making structures. So it will be important that in that aspect, women are given real power to engage and have an influence in these decision-making processes. In overall, it would be also important that all countries adopt a gender-responsive approach for preparedness, response, and assistance. And the current experience has shown the importance of doing so. And that would be, of course, relevant in one of the MX that it is focused on this topic. And the recent report that have been mentioned by UNIDIR that was published in 2019 that addressed the missing links, it's also a very good reference if we want to broaden more understanding on the question of preparedness, response, and assistance, and the gender responsive approach. And one of the main challenges that there is still reluctance and limited understanding of what gender mainstreaming means and what actions might be taken at different levels. So activities like what we are having right now create awareness raising and more understanding, and that will be a very positive starting point. But there's one element that I would like to underscore. Integrating gender perspective in our work should not be perceived as an additional requirement, workload, or burden. It is about ensuring that the BWC operates in the most effective, efficient, and inclusive way possible. And these objectives are in line with the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 of 2000 on women, peace, and security, the UNGA resolutions on women, disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control, and the Secretary General's Agenda for Disarmament, as well as the SDG 5 on gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. Thank you, Ambassador.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Griselle, for that. I'm going to turn now to Ngoc Phong van der Blai on the role of the ISU in advancing gender equality and gender perspectives in the BWC. Perhaps you can give us your thoughts on the benefits and the challenges that you see in this area. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Ambassador, and good afternoon, distinguished guests. First, I would like to say how pleased I am to participate in this important discussion on behalf of my unit, the BWC ISU. So, as you may already know, I'm the Political Affairs Officer. On the role of the ISU, I think we should approach this on two different angles. So the first angle is us, ISU, as a UN entity within UNODA. And the second angle is us as the Secretariat of the BWC, the convention itself. So as the entity of a UN entity and within UNODA, then we are respecting, of course, the UN policy regarding gender, and this would include then a list of resolutions and rules and policies that actually some of them were listed by Grisel. So I'm not going into detail, but roughly UNSCR 1325, which is the landmark on resolution women, peace and security, UNGA resolution 6569, which was the first time that the General Assembly formally addressed the vital links between women and disarmament. There's also UN system-wide policy on gender equality and the empowerment of women, UNSG disarmament agenda, Action 3637, UNSG SDGs 5 on gender equality that Grisel mentioned, UN ODA gender equality policy, the mainstreaming action plan, etc., etc. So all of these, we follow all these rules, and they are carefully looked at. Then on these rules, what are the concrete actions we are taking? Then first, UNODA is imposing on us to do a careful gender data collection and analysis. So we are reporting already after event that we organized, for example. Our high representative, Ms. Nakamitsu, is an international gender champion. And our UNSG is declining any panel discussion where women are not represented. And us, as his staff, we try whenever possible and respectfully, we try to encourage when the organizers, we notice that there's no women, we try to encourage and we try to follow the example of our UNSG. And then there's also the gender inclusive language. If you look at the old speeches or old reports of BWC formal documents, you may find still BWC chairman, but now in new documents, you will see BWC chairperson, for example. So very simple, but one needs to think about this. And then gender awareness in the recruitment process of all UNODA staff. Also mandatory trainings that we're receiving. Any new staff actually are receiving mandatory training on gender. And from time to time also, we have the training to take again. And there's also a promotion of work-life balance with flexible work arrangement, for example, mentorship program to support female staff career, etc. And then, so this is on the UN side. And again, as ISU, as staff of the UN, these are the rules we respect. And then as the Secretariat of the BWC, there's another angle. Then we, for example, promote gender equality within the formal and informal meetings of BWC. So we would advertise, we would put on our website or on registration lists, etc., for meeting of experts, meeting of state parties, workshops, webinars, and review conferences, etc. We would encourage equality of gender. And then we also, whenever possible, again, with much respect, we try to promote women's empowerment. So in which means we, again, try to have also female speakers, panelists. We try to encourage female office holders, head of delegations, female also making formal statements during the meetings, etc. And then we have also promotion of gender perspective in our projects and programs, which mean, for example, for our sponsorship program, we will try to achieve 50% female sponsored and male sponsorees. For example, we have several programs that I could describe maybe a bit later when you talk, you asked me to talk about successes. And then we also have in our communication strategy, which means websites, social media, newsletter, videos. We really keep in mind that there's a gender lens to apply in this communication strategy as well. So on the benefits and positive developments and positive aspects that we have seen, so the first easy one, we see that the numbers of female participation is steadily rising for our official BWC meetings. We're not getting there, but it's getting always better. And if we look at NGO participations as well, basically recently we see that there's more actually female representative within the NGO, more female experts than male actually. And then in our programs, and that's what I said before, the sponsorship program or other program, for example, that our training programs that we give ourselves, then the one that was funny because we encouraged maybe twice, then we noticed that in the trainees that we received, that was the previous one that we ran in October 2020, there were 97% of females. So we thought maybe we did too much. So for example, that could be called a success. And so we believe that in general, our BWC stakeholders are increasingly sensitized on gender issues, but still this should be said with some or should be understood in a relative manner. There are some state parties that are more and more sensitized, but more than others. So there's still work to be done on that. And then the challenges, I think this is the most interesting part of your question, Ambassador Gaffey, because I believe the problem is beyond already what Grisel said. The problem is beyond counting the number of female in the room. The problem is systemic, and it goes beyond the scope of the BWC regime. It goes into the life sciences and security area imbalance. And then we should look into the social and cultural divergence between the UN policy and some state parties as well. And which means that the changes should happen maybe sometimes earlier than what happens in the BWC meeting room or outside of the BWC meeting room or BWC scenery. What Daniel mentioned in his speech already, it means that we should already start promoting and give access to girls in education and general access to science and technology in particular. So it's that's what we say, it's systemic. It should happen way before, and it's too late already within the meeting room of the UN. And then I think another problem is the perception from state parties that they believe that the topic of gender is part of a rhetorical political debate, but they don't. Some of them don't understand what it brings as concrete outcome. So yeah, it's politically correct to promote gender, fine, I'll do it. But what is really the added value of discussing gender? What do I win as an outcome when I negotiate and I fight for this during the review conference, for example? That's a good question, and that's every delegation, every ambassador should understand or should believe. So that's another point. And then the lack of awareness on data, on gender-related impact on BW this is also an area that we should make more research. It's not so known data, and we are lagging behind in our discussions. Thank you for your question, Ambassador Gaffey.
Thank you very much, and you know, you make some very important points there on the challenges, which we might want to pick up in the discussion. I mean, you're right. This isn't just rhetoric, and we shouldn't have to explain why there is a real benefit in having a more gender responsive approach. But maybe we do have to. Maybe we do have to make the point and make it over and over again, because that's our experience, is that we do have to keep putting the message out there. So thank you for that. We'll pick up some of those points, I hope, in the discussion. I just noticed that in the chat, UNIDIR have posted the missing links document, so I would urge you to read that. And I urge you, before, as we go to our next speaker, just to think of some questions and comments, because after that we'll open up the discussion. But I'm turning now to Stephanie Norlock. And Stephanie, you know, sex and gender are really important variables when conducting biomedical and health-related research, and they really can help us uncover differentiated or potentially differentiated impacts of biological weapons among women, men, boys, girls. And I think there might not be as much knowledge out there on this as there should both be. So would you be able to give us some examples of sex-specific and gendered impacts and explain their implications for the BWC?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ambassador Gaffey. And this is a complex question, and this is a question that many professionals, which span several professional sectors, whether they are directly participating in the BTWC discussions or not, have been thinking about for a long time. And so I will sort of dance between gender and sex, but before I go any further, I will distinguish between the two, because that is quite important. Where sex is relating to the physical and biological characteristics that distinguish males and females. And then gender refers to distinguishing between men and women, or beyond that, where gender refers to roles, behaviors, activities, and attributes, which are given by society. And these differences are not only just argued to present significant differences in how men and women contribute to global health security, specifically how they may directly or indirectly support non-proliferation of biological weapons, but also how lapses in health security affect them. And more specifically, when addressing biological weapons, emerging discourse points to sexual and gender dimorphisms across several levels of understanding and implementing gender equitable disarmament and non-proliferation efforts. So with these definitions, I'd like to go a little bit deeper into some very well-mentioned points so far with regards to gender and how this is different across leadership roles and the front line. And so as stated, gender has specifically emerged as a priority topic for many countries assessing their response to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Some of this has overlapped with questions regarding disarmament. Only as of 2019, as one of the speakers mentioned, women are disproportionately staffed on healthcare front lines, in addition to taking on even more unpaid labor within their homes and communities, furthering the gender gap, especially in times of crisis. Simultaneously, women are underrepresented in decision-making roles, even specifically at the national level, particularly in pandemic task forces, which govern the women majority frontline in healthcare. And this imbalance leads to an incomplete understanding of what health emergencies actually look like in our communities, where what is on paper in decision-making may not necessarily reflect what is happening in the clinic, in schools, etc. So beyond COVID-19, when considering other health emergency events, such as the previously mentioned Ebola outbreaks in West Africa, women are similarly more likely to be exposed to pathogens through their care roles. This may either be through healthcare nursing positions, it may be through care for children if their neighbor is sick, many other examples like that, where they come into contact with more bodily fluids and are more susceptible to community transmission. And as I may have mentioned earlier, sexual dimorphisms in emerging biomedical research are, in my maybe biased opinion, not celebrated enough and considered enough as the findings that they are. And what I mean by this is, while there has been established sexual dimorphisms in terms of immunological response between men and women, where women tend to have a little bit of an advantage in terms of greater immune response, there is emerging research that points to lasting chronic problems that are particularly relevant to the impact of biological weapons, such as, for example, peripheral neuropathies, which is a chronic pain condition that is related to peripheral nerve injury, so direct injury to your nervous system that causes long-lasting problems. And so models such as this have been based on male only or sex neutral models, where animal models are not sexed. They're not determined whether they are male or female. And so this primary research has progressed to clinic, and there are several researchers now that are discovering the inefficacies with this model. And so where lasting impacts such of certain biological weapons, such as neuropathic pain, has almost twice the incidence in women as it does in men, again, we're seeing discrepancies between what is on paper and what is actually happening. And so when considering these impacts in the Biological Weapons Convention, my mind again goes to the begging question at this point, which is how applicable are these articles or the papers that we're dealing with? How are they supposed to protect women within member states' parties as equally as they do men, knowing the inequities that exist in global health security, in past biomedical research models, and in senior level decision-making representation? So I will specifically draw your attention to Article 10 of the Convention, which is a very common article discussed in non-governmental organization networks such as mine, which states that state parties are undertaking to facilitate and have the right to participate in the fullest possible exchange of equipment, materials, and information for peaceful purposes. And whereas states consist of more or less 50% women, and if you were to consider women all over the world to be a state in of themselves, it would be the largest state in the world. It is understood, it is understood essentially that gender imbalance in decision-making, health emergency response, again, widens this gap, and women may not actually be as applicable under the convention as it is. So this is also not only an issue when considering the diversity of representatives meaningfully participating during BWC meetings, as previously discussed, it's also an issue of inclusion. And this is not discussed enough in gender perspectives, even in other well-established frameworks, where groups such as women may thrive and fully participate without needing to conform or being unable to communicate their views. While there are several metrics and commonly used metrics for reflecting diversity, inclusion can be a little bit more abstract. And this is sort of where we can push further, especially considering we are starting to see, how many women are actually speaking, how many women are compensated for the work that they do, for mentorship, for all of these extra professional development activities that they want to pass on to the next generation of biosecurity professionals. And so while we're sort of even at the start of this journey of incorporating gendered perspectives into BWC meetings, I believe this is an opportunity that we can use to really focus on investigating gender perspectives, which are not ancillary to the existing priorities that we have in implementing the convention, that we can investigate these with the same rigor and the same sort of emphasis that we do on sustainability and on global inclusion as we do with other articles, with other topics. And so that is sort of my main recommendation in noting the sex-specific and gendered impacts of biological weapon proliferation, which is to say that we should be considering gendered perspectives consistently and in a way that not only benefits a lot of the higher level women that are involved in decision-making in the BWC presently, but also the ways in which we investigate these topics will benefit women for years to come that will never set foot in the Palais des Nations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that really clear recommendation. Do you think that there is a need for significant further research now in this area?
With regards to, I would say research as a whole, I would say yes. And I'll break it down into a few different reasons why. And so the first sort of, I suppose, topic that I touched upon that comes to mind is biomedical research in particular. And as we are in the, I suppose, still sort of nascent early period of precision medicine as I envision it for years to come, this is really our friend when understanding women's health, especially in relation to things such as biological weapon proliferation, where the study of how we understand the biomedical impacts of biological weapons, the data can be quite limited, and often even more limited when we're considering women at different ages and with different hormonal profiles, which have been shown to generate different phenotypes of disease presentation. And so I used chronic pain as an example. And I'd like to bring particular note to a pretty significant group of young Canadian researchers who are women, who are specifically conducting this work to benefit other women that are in clinic and women all over the world who may either encounter this disorder naturally or may be the victim of a biological weapon in the future. But in any case, the use of precision medicine with limited data relies on a risk-benefit profile, which has been used for example, pregnant women. The use of prophylaxis to treat anthrax exposure is one that comes to mind. But a lot of these papers are can be kind of speculatory, and to say, it always concludes with, we need more research. And I know that all of us here agree that we cannot use the purposeful proliferation of anthrax to study how that would potentially impact pregnant women directly. But I think that more certainly needs to be done with regards to considering, again, all of the populations that are going to be using a treatment model off of paper, off of, primary research where animals do not encounter the same sort of social patterns that we do, and really having conversations between professionals that are in the laboratory and in decision-making roles, and in the intermediate, in the community as well, which I don't think is considered enough, to say, does everything mesh? Does everything match together? Does it make sense? Or are we still encountering these implementation gaps across professional sectors and across the flow of information from research to policy to community? And so just one more point that I sort of wanted to make with regards to research is to, as I said before, we need to develop more consistent indicators for the impact of different human elements of biosecurity, which serve the Biological Weapons Convention, from many bottom-up style interventions where we engage with these scientists, with a lot of younger women on the front lines in diagnostic laboratories, et cetera, to communicate and sort of foster an interest in biological weapons disarmament and non-proliferation. And so the use of different things like peer mentorship, specific gender-focused leadership training, more research needs to be done to establish more quantifiable outcomes of these interventions, where a lot of it sort of stays in the qualitative. A lot of the answers are, well, it depends. I think that there is a lot of value in community-led interventions such as this to further power gender mainstreaming at the high level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and that puts it up to us in terms of what further research is needed. So I think we've had a really sort of broad-ranging set of interventions there, relating to simple actions that can be taken by states and by the ISU in the context of the convention, and finishing up there with a kind of a range of research, which would really help us move matters forward. I want to turn now to the to our participants, all of you there. There's some 90 people here, and I see people are a little bit slow to ask questions, but there are questions there. So I'm going to go first to Selina Banu, who's a plant pathologist in Bangladesh. Selina, do you want to maybe switch on your camera and your mic and just put your interesting question to the panel? And unmute.
Thank you very much. Give me the floor. I am a plant pathologist. So from my perspective, plant disease this is the weapon. You know, I'm from Asia, so and most of them are women and children.
Selina, just to interrupt, your sound is a little broken. So maybe it would be helpful if you just turn your picture off. Sometimes that works to get the sound. So we've seen you now.
Thank
if
you.
You just try it with your picture off, let's see how that goes.
Thank you. Just the plant disease has great importance as a biological weapon. You know, in the Great Bengal female in Asia during the Second World War, due to the plant disease brown spot of rice, the major food in this area, so 2 million people died, and most of them are women or children. So we have to think about gender perspective from the view of diversified area. Human disease, plant disease, animal disease, and also the participation of women. In most areas, all these are affected the women. Now the COVID-19 also. So worldwide, it's devastating, these epidemics also. So I don't know whether you are thinking about this COVID-19 as a biological weapon also. Who knows who might want to use that one as a biological weapon. So that's why my perspective is from the perspective of human disease, plant disease, and animal disease, we have to consider the gender perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's a very, very relevant and topical point. I think Fong, you might have some remarks on that, and then anyone else who would like to comment, because it is so topical. Fong, I'll hand to you.
Thank you, Ambassador Gaffey. Thank you, Mrs. Selina Banu, for mentioning COVID-19. I mean, in general, in terms of impacts and effects and on gender, or more specifically on a female, I would like here to quote an expert from WHO who said that it doesn't matter, when he was referring to Ebola in 2014-15, the expert said that it doesn't matter if it is of natural or a natural outbreak. The most important is the impact is the same. And in that way, we should draw lessons learned from Ebola, and equally from the COVID-19. We should imagine how the world would look like if we would have biological warfare. Then we can look at our world now, already under the pandemic, and this is scary enough, and we should draw lessons learned from this. So it's a difficult question to ask whether COVID-19 is a biological weapons or not. This is not my place. This is more the place of other experts and discussing on this, but at least the effect is the same and the devastation is the same. So we should already learn a lot from this, and especially on gender. I believe we should make use of the opportunity to analyze more an area that is lacking data, to track more information on the impact of COVID on female. And I believe there are already a lot of discussions on this. For example, that the differentiation of vaccines on women or on men, for example, or the role of women in healthcare, the important role, or how the mothers are impacted during the COVID time, etc. Thank you for your question. I hope I could at least address part of this. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and there's a lot to that. I mean, we're still in the midst of COVID, so we're still. It's timely that we think it through. One thing that's really clear is that we have to rethink our approach to risk, because COVID was a pandemic. The pandemic was a risk waiting to happen, and we weren't ready for it. And you could say that is also the case in other areas. Do any of the other panelists want to say something in response to Selina Banu?
The only comment that I was going to have was to say thank you so much for bringing up this perspective. I find that plant health and plant disease are not as discussed as animal and person and human health. And I constantly remind people that, you know, methods of biological warfare is not, the end goal is not always to impact human health, and how even with COVID-19 impacting human health, the sheer devastation that different countries have experienced economically, this is also a really good example. And so I feel that for certain lessons learned from the pandemic, I feel like we may be able to be more ready for more agriculturally focused threats.
Great, thank you. Grisel, did you want to say anything?
Yes, thank you so much, Ambassador. And I thank you so much, Selina, for bringing this topic and the different perspective and how multidimensional can this issue be and how this can affect it. And it's very interesting because one of the main punchline throughout this discussion is the question of data and research. And we know that biological weapons have been used in the past, but we do not have information of what had been the gender impact of those used in the past. So now we have to take these experiences from natural outbreak of disease such as Ebola outbreak, the Zika virus, and now the COVID-19 pandemic, to inform on possible differences in the effects of biological weapons on women and men, their significance in aspects such as preparedness, response, assistance, and recovery, and also how we can improve the collection on gender disaggregated data, and at the same time support work on research and investigation on those differentiated impacts of the biological weapons. And one of the things that the lesson learned that we can draw from this natural disease outbreak is how the gender roles have led to different levels of exposure between women and men, and has shaped different experiences in terms of social stigma, discrimination, also the opportunity to access to information and health services. And also some research has shown that for certain type of variations, there's a different impact on the mortality and vulnerability between women and men regarding some diseases or biological agents, and of course the type of impact that it would have in their physical and mental health. So I thank you for that information. And in overall, we just realized that we are not prepared for a deliberate use of weapons. We are not prepared for this disease outbreak, but we have in the UN this theme that we need to build back for better. And now this is an opportunity to build back for better, but within the framework also of the BWC. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thanks for that. And you mentioned gender data there, and I see we have a question from Dana Perkins, which is a follow-on from that. So Dana, would you like to put your question to the panelists, if you can?
Hi, this is Dana Perkins. Thank you so much for this wonderful panel. Timely and great discussions here. I was wondering, I put a question in the panel. I found the gender disaggregated data that the UN Secretariat put out in a dashboard in order to further the UN strategy on gender parity, very useful. When we talk about women participation in BWC, such a live dashboard, I think it will be very useful to bring home the message to participants. And I was wondering if that is a consideration for BWC ISU, for the UN Secretariat to establish such a dashboard for upcoming BWC meetings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dana. Thank you for that. Well, Fong, there's another question for you. We'll hand to you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And hi, Dana. Nice to see you, even virtually online. And thanks for your active participation. As always, I know gender is an important topic dear to your heart. Yeah, thanks for the proposal. It is really seriously noted. I mean, at my level, I cannot just comment like this. We are at the level of the whole branch, UNODA Geneva branch. We are looking now at initiatives and idea to push further. And so your idea is noted and will be presented. And hopefully at the later stage, I would be able to announce anything, but you understand that I cannot just comment now, but it's really noted. It's a good idea. And I honestly don't see why this could not be explored further. And since I have the floor, I would just ask for you, your patience, Ambassador, for a few seconds. I wanted to react to Stephanie Norlock's comment on Article 10. Since I'm the member of the ISU coordinating all issues related to Article 10, this is an interesting remark you made that supporting developing state parties, actually gender is an important component. And it's true, and we have taken this also into action. As concrete example, projects that we are in discussion with Norway now, and we are at the final stage of agreement, will include a gender component. For us, it's very important. We believe for Norway as well, it's very important. And in all the projects, new projects now that we are discussing, but just to say that, yes, for Article 10, especially supporting experts from developing state parties, we believe that, yeah, gender is should not be neglected in this aspect. We believe also that youth as well, we are trying now to bring in really more voices, different voices and different perspective. So thanks for your comment, Stephanie, and back to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't see questions in the chat box. Oh, I do actually. Someone's just getting in just in time. Hannah Salama, would you like to come in? You have a question for Stephanie?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to, I'm Hannah from UNIDIR, and I'd like to thank the panel for joining and for all the participants. And just a very quick question, like on practicalities, Stephanie, what are the programs, or can you tell us more about the programs that you are running to promote women in biosafety and biosecurity?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that question, Hannah. So for a little bit more information, the International Federation of Biosafety Associations is a worldwide federation of national and regional professional biosafety associations, as well as observer organizations, of which the BWC-ISU is an observer organization under our federation. And we implement a variety of different certification and mentorship initiatives, as well as a new one that I will mention at the very end. But the first program that falls under my portfolio is the IFBA Global Mentorship Program, which is a peer mentorship program for biosafety and biosecurity specialists and professionals, where they are paired with a professional that is in their region. So one particular sort of special part about the program is that there is a large proportion of south to south mentorship, where emerging professionals are able to receive support that is appropriate to the local context of their biosafety and biosecurity landscape, where different countries and regions are beholden to different legislation and capacity considerations. This is particularly important as we consider the intersection of different identities of biosafety and biosecurity professionals. And what I mean by that is the different aspects of somebody's identity, where I'm a woman, but I'm also Canadian. That is different from somebody who is also a woman, but is Nigerian, who is Bangladeshi, who is Australian. And so in this program, we also really emphasize promoting and retaining women mentors in biosafety and biosecurity, and building that network of women biosafety and biosecurity specialists from across the world, ensuring that as much as possible, we are matching emerging women professionals with women mentors who understand what the experience is like to be in different decision-making arenas, on the front line, potentially as a minority in their work team. And then in addition, we also offer a program that's called the IFBA Biosafety Heroes program. And this program is to highlight those that really make a difference in their in global biosafety and biosecurity. And there have been a number of women that have been awarded this this sort of award. And I can put links in the description, but for the sake of time, I will finish with the IFBA Equity Focused Coordinating Committee, which is the most directly related program that we are implementing right now. And this program hosts a number of biosafety and biosecurity experts from around the world, largely women, who discuss a lot of what we're discussing right now, which is developments in biosafety and biosecurity through a gender lens. And so I will link again some different resources, but one of the most notable pieces of work that we've done so far is interviewing the global community with their perspectives on how gender and age impact their experience as a biosafety and biosecurity professional.
Ambassador Gaffey, please unmute your microphone.
Apologies, yes, I'm talking away to myself there. Apologies. Yeah, I was just saying we have just about a few minutes left, 3 minutes or less left. So I just thought we could maybe wrap up this really, really good discussion by going back to each of our panelists and just asking you, it's a very unfair question, to take 1 minute each to tell us what are the top priorities building on this discussion now that you want to see integrated into the BWC, the top 1 or 2 priorities in, if you can do it, in a minute each. And I'll start with Grisel. Sorry to throw it to you initially.
Thank you, Ambassador. I will summarize these main points. First, gender equality in BWC, not numbers, but reality in substance. More research on the gender impact of biological weapons. Also, to achieve all these outcomes during the review conference. That should be the starting point. Thank you.
Great, concise and substantive. No, Fong, I'll go to you now.
Thank you, Ambassador. I won't be that concise and short, but I will try. I think 2 level for state parties back in on the national level is what we mentioned already, to explore how to promote STEM early in the education courses of young girls. harnessing the scientific talent of women and girls is really important, and as early as possible. Explore also possibilities of mentorship, how to invest substantially in arms control, non-proliferation, disarmament education with a mentorship program on the national level. And then in the BWC meetings is to start thinking how to include these topics, this gender topic into our work program, keeping in mind the 9th review conference arriving soon, and also maybe fund research on the aspects of research that we said that are lagging behind the impact of biological weapons on women, for example. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Stephanie.
Thank you very much. So I suppose I would summarize the sort of main priorities that I've highlighted today in beyond just repeating the very important point of developing sort of methods for inclusion as well as just diversity, is developing methods to rigorously study gender perspectives in the BWC just as rigorously as we study other aspects of its implementation, and ultimately to focus on not only the promotion and retention of women and girls in STEM and in biological disarmament, but ensuring that we as biosafety and biosecurity professionals, specifically at the higher leadership level, are aware of and advocating for people that are on the front line. And making sure that even though there are many women that do not participate directly in disarmament affairs, that they are equally protected under the Biological Weapons Convention, no matter what state party they're in, and no matter what state of health emergency or health security may exist at the present time.
Thank you very much. And can I say thank you to our panelists. You have done a far better job than I could have done in summarizing the highlights of our discussion and what we want to see coming out of that. I think you have given us a really strong and practical agenda to bring forward this agenda. There has been a feeling that maybe the BWC discussions have lagged behind. I think there's no reason for that anymore, because you have given us in this discussion so many areas that we need to follow up on, both in terms of simple actions that can be taken and in terms of areas for further investigation and further research. So I think we've achieved what we wanted with this event today. We really have been raising awareness. There's been a very good turnout. Thank you to everyone for staying with the discussion. Thank you to all our speakers, and thank you to our panelists. It had been a really worthwhile lunchtime in Geneva and whatever other time it is for you in other parts of the world. Thank you all very much, and let's stay committed to bringing forward this agenda, because it is a vital one, not just in its own terms, but also in terms of the effectiveness of the BWC. Thank you all very much. I wish you an excellent rest of the day, and as I say, we look forward to following up. Thanks for that, and good luck.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.